Dream culture. So I'm going to start today by reading a little passage from On the Nature of the Psyche by Carl Jung. And I'm going to use it as a jump off point to talk about the conscious and the unconscious. I'm just going to get right into it and bear with me about my reading aloud skills. We can say that individuals are equal only insofar as they are in a large measure unconscious. Unconscious, that is, of their actual differences. The more unconscious a man is, the more he will conform to the general canon of psychic behavior. But the more conscious he becomes of his individuality, the more pronounced will be the differences from other subjects, and the less he will come up to common expectations. Further, his reactions are much less predictable. This is due to the fact that an individual consciousness is always more highly differentiated and more extensive. But the more extensive it becomes, the more differences it will perceive, and the more it will emancipate itself from the collective rules. For the empirical freedom of the will grows in the proportion to the extension of consciousness. A differentiated consciousness no longer takes it for granted that one's own preconceptions are applicable to others and vice versa. So if we kind of apply this to our daily lives and how our habits kind of work, you can think of yourself as like when you first wake up and you kind of unconsciously like lunge for your phone, check your texts, your tweets, or whatever you do, right? This is one aspect of unconscious behavior. You may make a coffee or, and you're kind of just in this autopilot. And I think everybody's familiar with this. And that's one form of being unconscious in a large degree, doing things just because, or things you just do. Like and the other side is things you don't have access to in the mind, like old memories or the roots of emotions, all these things that you don't have conscious understanding or recollection of, like on the spot, right? Which is like obviously a vast thing as well. But my point is that I think that dream practice really brings in an interesting dynamic because you start to bring conscious reflection to unconscious materials. And I think that there's like a parallel with mindfulness where you're watching yourself and always being conscious of the way that you live, trying to keep yourself out of going with the flow and finding yourself in this kind of robotic automaton-esque way of going about your day. This is similar in the sense that you don't allow this unconscious period of your sleep, your dreams, however, you don't allow that to remain unconscious in the same way that you don't allow your day to remain unconscious. So I think that there is a parallel, but my point is that I think there's an interesting repercussion of bringing conscious light to unconscious material, right? Unconscious in the sense that you're like not awake, right? Which is kind of weird, especially once you start getting to the lucid state. The line becomes really blurred between, are you even unconscious anymore? Like, do you ever have a state where you're unconscious? And briefly, I'll say, like, there was this, in the depth of my lucid dreaming practices back in the day, it seemed like there was one or two times where I felt like I was almost completely conscious of my body falling asleep, which is, if there's like things online about if you lay there with like 10 minutes and you don't itch yourself or these bunch of these things, then you can kind of see that your body falls asleep before your mind falls asleep. So I think I was completely aware of that. And then into the blackness, I still kind of remained a little conscious. And then as the dream started to form, it was like, oh, okay, now I'm here in the dream. And then it is almost as if I didn't sleep. And what I mean by that is, like, of course I slept and I felt rested, but I was never really unconscious for like 24 hours. You know what I mean? Probably was unconscious during my day more so than in the practice of sleeping, right? Interesting. So what I'm saying is that by reflecting on your dreams and bringing conscious insight to your unconscious state, obviously there's more clarity there, but I think you close a gap in your life, essentially. And I'm not exactly sure what the full repercussions of this is and part of the community and the culture that we're attempting to kind of kickstart here is that we will have kind of an idea bank created amongst peers so that we can start to understand these things together, right? And I don't think that it's a one-man army type of job. I think that what the full effects of being more conscious are definitely something to be discovered. But I think Jung hints to it right here, is that as you move further from the collective kind of database and into a state of individuality, I would say obviously you understand more about yourself, but the point is that you kind of emancipate, right? You emancipate yourself from kind of the collective strains, and some people live completely within this. And I'm not saying that this is a bad thing or that I detest it in any way. Really, I think that there is a beauty of having comfort in the group and that belonging and collectiveness that you can find in certain aspects, but having access to individuality when necessary, and then the collective is always there necessarily. I think that these are two things to be pursued individually or kind of separately, or kind of separately cultivated, but having an understanding of both. But through individuality, your own sets of data become apparent, rather than am I just playing on the kind of pre-established kind of pop culture that exists, right? And so I just want to take a quick sec to draw another interesting parallel for me. Was that dreams and movies, this was done, I think, also by the Nerdwriter, if I am correct, on YouTube, where he talked about how, like, in the middle of a dream, and the movie always starts in the middle of the movie. So there's that point where, like, you realize, oh, I'm now in a mafia movie. Did I say this in the last video? You're now in a mafia movie, or I'm now in a zombie dream, right? So this kind of, like, there's this interesting parallel between movies and dreams. And what I'm really trying to say is that I think it's interesting because movies are always, I think, necessarily trying to play on collective pursuits and are trying to capture something. If you've seen this new release, The Arrival, really, really great movie, highly recommend it. I think it captures one of the collective problems, global problems that we're facing in the communication and in the technological era. That is very much a collective problem, not so much an individual problem. And I'm sure they go back and forth. I'd have to watch the movie again to see how they play on the individual as well. And I have some inclinations, but I don't really want to get fully into it. But my point is that movies, I think, necessarily are attempting to capture a collective experience and using collective data sets. And in the same way that a joke, like if you make a joke about like Tony Stark, you necessarily need to have access to that data to be able to make that joke. And if someone doesn't have access to that data, then that joke is kind of a miss on them. And so necessarily by playing on the collective experience and selling these movies to the masses and etc., like you're trying to find something that speaks to a lot of people at once. But the interesting parallel is that I think movies in our daily life fulfill what our dreams fulfill in our individual life, and I think that's partially the brilliance of Inception. So having access to your own data, as I've already stressed, I think is priceless. And I just found that it was an interesting parallel between the two, right? So I don't really want to go on too long. I guess one thing I'll do before I go is I'll tell you about a dream that I had last night. I recorded, and I found it kind of interesting, and I think it gives a little bit of insight into my life and what I'm going through. And I think I slowly want to be able to give you guys more of that and maybe more actual details. So last night I had this dream that I was basically watching these two people that my drug dealer, they owed money to my drug dealer, and I was like basically babysitting them until they paid up, right? And so I'm basically like chaperoning. There's a guy and a girl, and for some reason there was like lightsabers available, and for me, I'm like, yo, the force is strong in this one, you know? So they actually tried to attack me, and I had to use the force to like pull the lightsabers away, and I'm kind of like battling with them, and I push them against the wall, and the back of the walls kind of break in, and they keep coming at me, and there's this moment where I grab the lightsaber, and it's a yellow lightsaber, and I'm holding them right in front of me, like right in my face, and I'm yelling at them, saying that like, you're lucky that I'm a Jedi and not a Sith, or else I would kill you both right now. And then I like release them, right? And to me, I think there's an interesting symbolism with the yellow lightsaber and the fact that I completely recognized the darker, more violent kind of drives while also consciously choosing, or I'm not at the point of lucidity, so I couldn't even say conscious, but while also choosing to remain on the light side of things, even though there was a battle taking place and etc. And for me, in my personal life, I think there has been this divide where I've always kind of been a little bit too on the light side, and only recently have I kind of like learned the value of things like tough love or sometimes I think you just kind of, this may sound wrong, but like fire with fire. Like if someone's going to come at you with aggression, there is a time for violence. And I think that people who are complete pacifists are a little bit naive of the fact that you're going to give yourself over to violence if you don't defend yourself to a point, right? In self-defense and martial arts, I think that there are a lot of schools of thought that definitely take that into account. And so for me, I wonder, right? Again, is there an eluding symbolism? And this is something that we'll discover through time, right? Through reflections. I'll have more well thought out sections for sure. Is that a type of symbolism that shows that I'm potentially getting closer to having some sort of synthesis between the dark and light side of myself? I wonder, right? It's an impression that I have of it, but it very well could be more of a wish fulfillment, right? Which is totally another function of the dream. Okay, so basically I just want you guys to think about the individual versus the collective and how bringing consciousness to unconscious materials in your life actually reinforce your own personal identity and your own growth. Okay, so this is Dream Culture. I'm Austin Miller, and I'm just going to wrap this one up. I'm going to give out a quick shout out to Dan the Dishwashing Man, my roommate, killing it back there, doing what he got to do. Yeah, guys, for the memes, have a good day. Peace.